We've now covered each of Porter's 5 forces: barriers to entry, the bargaining power of both buyers and suppliers, pressure from substitute products, and the rivalry among existing competitors. Each of these forces should be carefully considered when forming your strategic identity. So now you're thinking, how are we going to glue everything together? How will we use these 5 forces to develop our strategic position? There's not necessarily one method to do this, and creating an effective strategy is as much an art as a science. That being said, there is a methodology that's been used for years that can help. It's called a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Essentially, a SWOT analysis helps you identify your strategic advantages and your vulnerabilities. To perform a SWOT analysis, you'll want to first consider the information you need. You'll also want to involve your entire management team in the process from the beginning to maximize the diversity of views that funnel into your work. Your strategy will hopefully guide your enterprise for a while, so you want to make sure you've gathered as much information as possible while planning. Once you've gathered sufficient information to begin the process, you'll want to convene your team for at least a full day to independently analyze each of the 4 elements: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then create a strategic vision or mission that is consistent with all 4. Use a whiteboard or an easel to capture all the inputs from the group, and don't evaluate or judge the input until you've captured all the comments. Let's start with the first element, your strengths. How you should focus on your internal assets that put you in a position of strength. Consider Apple today. One of its strengths is that it has extremely high name recognition and brand loyalty. This imposes large barriers to entry, since a potential rival will have to invest heavily in advertising or product functionality to overcome this loyalty. Another of Apple's strengths is that its position as a product leader and its high sales volume ensures it faces very low bargaining power from suppliers. Because Apple has historically been the first entrant into a large market, if suppliers want to enter the market, they have to go through Apple. This gives Apple extremely strong leverage. Clearly, no early-stage idea has an array of the strengths of a company such as Apple, but you should be able to compile quite a long list, or you wouldn't be involved in the venture to begin with. Once you've gone through your venture's current strengths, you should analyze its weaknesses. This is one of the more difficult parts of the process. In particular, no one really wants to talk about weaknesses, especially with their peers or their bosses. Moreover, it's difficult for founders and early-stage enterprises to even acknowledge weaknesses to themselves. Keep in mind, the more honest you are and your team is about your weaknesses, the better prepared you'll be for the inevitable challenges ahead. One technique that is often used to surface and identify weaknesses is letting everyone write them down anonymously and then compiling them and posting them for everyone to see. If we again consider Apple, it now faces a strategic weakness due to the intensity of rivalry in its industry. Over the last few years, more companies have entered Apple's markets and market shares are becoming more uniform, especially in regards to Android products. Switching costs have also decreased, as many cell phone carriers now allow Apple substitutes on their networks. Apple's wide product offering requires it to simultaneously fend off competitors on many fronts, while also maintaining a quick pace of product development. It can be argued that this is now a position of weakness. The next stage of a SWOT analysis involves opportunities. This is where you will have your longest list. Everyone on your team will have a host of ideas to make your enterprise better, and most of them will be quite good. The natural tendency is to agree to undertake most of them, not only because they are compelling, or at least cool, but because one of your valued team members conceived of it and no one wants to shoot down the idea of a colleague. The problem is not all opportunities will align with the company's core competencies and its emerging business model. It takes real leadership to just say no when an opportunity will lead you astray from your core value proposition. But to do otherwise will cause you to abandon your strategy and readopt the practice of just trying to run faster than the next guy. Returning to Apple, one of the many opportunities it may be able to exploit involves television. Can Apple encourage and capitalize on changes taking place in the television industry that look much like the changes that took place in movies and music and books? Clearly, this is more than a technological challenge. Apple executives would do well to employ this 5 forces analysis to determine the appropriate response. The last stage of a SWOT analysis is to examine the threats to your enterprise. You're looking here not just for internal weaknesses, but potential changes in the environment in which you operate that could make you strategically weaker. With Apple, their dominant position makes them especially likely to face competitive threats. For instance, as more entrants come into their markets, they might not only lose bargaining power with consumers, but also with suppliers. Without new innovation, this market will become commodity-like, as copycat entrants saturate the market with similar products. This lack of differentiation will increase rivalry in the market with all of the problems that rivalry encourages. And of course, Apple is always threatened by pressure from substitute products, such as Google Glass.